Here we go.
If you've been following my page for a while now, you know that I'm an anime manga kind of guy, and that video games were my passion as a kid. And I know the rest of you grew up collecting and reading American comic books, DC and Marvel primarily. Spider-Man and Superman were your thing, and I get that. I respect that. I'm a fan of those works as well, but not to the extent that I was into video games and anime. I could tell you more about Super Mario Bros. And Dragon Ball Z than I could the Avengers or the Justice League. And aside from reading most of Marvel 1610 and a few other story arcs, most of my knowledge of American comics is derived from watching movies, reading wiki articles, and animated shows. Shout out to the Batman and X-Men animated series. But that's about it. That's the extent of my American comic book knowledge. But this news right here intrigues me, because it's a combination of something that I like with something that I love. Now for those who don't know what this means, Wit Studios is a major anime production company out of Japan. As you know, anime is huge over there. And their animation studios are on par with our movie studios. They're the equivalent to a Disney or a Warner Brothers or a Sony Pictures. And Wit Studios is one of the big boys, one of the more prominent companies. They're known for producing hits like Attack on Titan, Vinland Saga, Spy Family, Ranking of Kings. So they're a premier brand. They do good work. Now when I first heard this, I dismissed it as nothing, because I thought they were talking about doing a cameo or crossover, or maybe they were being contracted out to simply do a animation of a DC movie, like they did 15 years ago with 2008's Batman Gotham Knight. But recently I found out it's much bigger than that. They're not just going to animate or produce an American script, they're actually going to do an anime series with DC characters.
Yes! That's awesome!
Meaning they will be writing and creating stories. And in this case, they'll be creating a series with the Squad. Now, this threw me for a loop because I didn't see it coming. Typically, it's the other way around. It's American movie studios that acquire the rights to other properties and adapt them to film, just like we've seen with Walt Disney's acquisition of Marvel and Warner Brothers' acquisition of DC. But with the cooling down of the MCU and the rebooting of the DCU and the death of the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchises, the major studios have exhausted all of their properties, and they're desperate for the next fad. As one content creator put it, we are now in the Fat Elvis stage of the superhero genre. We still like it, but we acknowledge the fact that the shtick has gotten old, and the best days are in the past. And that's due to the overly generic, uninspired, woke garbage the MCU has been churning out for the past 4 years. Now, given the popularity of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, The Last of Us, and Witcher streaming series, there's been a push to get into video games. But adapting those are difficult. One, they were created for an interactive experience, whereas movies and television are passive. Two, there aren't many stories to adapt. We saw that a few years ago with the Mortal Kombat movie. They tried, but it's a fighting game. There isn't much of a story to tell, and the movie stunk. So they'd prefer to go after anime, because that's a passive form of entertainment. They're all about the story. So nothing has to be written or created, it's just a matter of adaptation. But anime is a code they can't seem to crack. American studios have been trying to get their hands on Japanese IPs for a while now, but with limited to no success. We've seen Netflix try with their crappy adaptations, with projects like Death Note and Cowboy Bebop, shows that have already completed their animated run. And they're currently doing a One Piece adaptation that looks awful, but that show has been around for 2 decades, and many would argue that it's past its peak. So there's nothing to lose by allowing Netflix to do an adaptation. But what we haven't seen is anyone adapting a new relevant manga or anime series. No one has been able to get their hands on a Black Clover, Fire Force, or Dr. Stone, for example. And that's because the Japanese take pride in their work. They aren't keen on seeing it denigrated by some woke American idiot filmmaker. For example, could you imagine how Disney would butcher the Dragon Ball franchise? They'd race, gender swap Rainbow, and Mary Sue the hell out of that IP. I have nightmares about what they do to Piccolo, an uber-masculine father figure whose character design is eerily similar to that of a black Moor, a black masculine man. They'd have a field day with him, because Piccolo doesn't have a wife. His species reproduces asexually. Disney would take that as an indicator of him being a member of the trans community. They'd take the father-son relationship he has with Gohan and turn it into a rainbow romance. But getting back to my point, with studios producing an anime with DC comic book characters, I think that is a great move move for Warner Bros. I think it's a smart move for them to partner with Japan, to give them license to reimagine their characters, instead of them trying to gain control of Japan's. Because anime and manga are dominating the US market right now. Not only is manga outselling DC and Marvel Comics by a wide margin, but look at what just happened a few weeks ago. While The Flash was tanking in the box office, the season 3 finale of Demon Slayer was breaking the internet. It crashed every server it was hosted on, and that's due to the creative prowess of the Japanese authors who create and write for that series. You see, Dragon Ball Z isn't great because it's Dragon Ball Z. It's great because of Akira Toriyama, who created it. Attack on Titan isn't what it is because it's Attack on Titan. Its success is due to its creator, Hajime Asayama. And that's something American studios don't seem to understand. They fixate on the IP, the intellectual property, instead of the person responsible for it. As a matter of fact, they think they can do better. That's why, once they gain control of an IP, they ignore the suggestions of its creators. Look no further than the way that Disney has ignored the suggestions of George Lucas when it came to Star Wars, or the way HBO dishonored the work of Alan Moore's Watchmen franchise. And not only do they dishonor the wishes of the series creators, they put the worst people imaginable in charge of it. Case in point, look at Kathleen Kennedy's run as head of Lucas Studios. Look at what happened to the Star Wars, Willow, and Indiana Jones franchises, once powerful brands that have imploded. Now in the hands of George Lucas, the man who created them, those were great intellectual properties. But in the hands of a mope like Kathleen Kennedy, they've become trash. Look at how HBO showrunners Daniel Weiss and David Benioff butchered Game of Thrones. That show was perfect when George R.R. Martin, the author of the book series the show is based on, was helping them write each episode. But the moment he left, the quality of the show began to decline. The first 4 seasons, the seasons that Martin was involved in, were the best in television history. Now seasons 5 and 6 after he left, they were really good, but not as good as the previous 4. And seasons 7 and 8 were an utter disaster. My point is, who you have writing and creating for the property matters more than the property itself, which is why Hollywood adaptations of popular IPs have traditionally stunk. Because studios and executives never honor the work or the people who created the franchise, nor do they consider the fans who made the franchise popular. They just think having the property is enough, which is why Japanese properties should never be under their control. But it got me to thinking, what happens if this becomes a trend? What happens if studios like Warner Bros. And Disney make a habit of partnering with Japan and giving them license over their work, particularly those properties that have failed? What is the long-term potential of such a relationship? Take the MCU for example. It's a turd lunch right now. Phase 4 was a complete disaster and Phase 5 looks to be the same. Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, admitted as much to CNBC. He said the franchise was diluted. In layman's terms, that means the quality fell off. It's not good anymore. And if you want to hear more about that, check out my response to his comments in the previous video. It's some of my best work. But getting back to Disney and the MCU, they've recently reacquired the rights of the X-Men, Blade, and Fantastic Four series. And they're currently in the process of bringing those properties into the MCU. But no one is confident they'll get it right. They're going to mess it up. But what if those properties were in the hands of Kohei Horikoshi and the team over at Bone Studios? You know, the people responsible for My Hero Academia? You can't convince me they wouldn't do a better job than those idiots currently working at Marvel. Because we talk about superhero fatigue and how it's really an MCU fatigue, because that's not the case with My Hero Academia. It too is a superhero genre, although animated, but its popularity has grown by leaps and bounds, with season 6 being their best ever. Again, you can check out my review of that series. But I have no doubt that Horikoshi and the crew could bring some of that same magic to the MCU. I mentioned Dan and Dave earlier and how they fumbled Game of Thrones after George R.R. Martin left. But imagine if George R.R. Martin and HBO handed the animation rights to Game of Thrones to Hajime Asayama or Makoto Yukimura, the teams at Wit or Mappa Studios, who created Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga, 2 series I'm extremely high on. Check out my review of both. How great would that be? I know their adaptation of Game of Thrones would be excellent. Because right now, when it comes to character development, world building, plot sophistication, creativity, and overall narrative, Japan has got the US beat. We don't have that level of innovation or creativity anymore, because our intellectual properties have been neutered, corporatized, and focus group tested for a mass general audience by minions and mercenaries with no passion for the projects they're writing and producing for. And what we've wound up Hollywood getting over the years is a bunch of woke, generic, trendy garbage. The cinematic equivalent of a boy band or a pop star. But again, Japan is different. They believe in the integrity of their work. Yes, they do it for money, but they also do it for honor and to appease core fans. And when they do adaptations of popular manga, they keep it as close as they can to the source material, or canon, even if it's something for a niche audience that overly offends others. For example, that first episode of Goblin Slayer. Some of you that have seen it know what I'm talking about, and you know what scene I'm referring to. That was some stuff I was not ready for. That's something that American studios would have left out, altered, or discussed off camera, but Japan kept it in there. And again, that speaks to how they care about the fan base. They don't pander to casual normies, focus groups, or trend chasers. And that's why I'm so excited. Now, I'm not saying everything that comes out of Japan that's great, but unlike the idiots working at Lucasfilms and Marvel Studios, at least they try to make something the base will enjoy. So I think it's a wonderful idea as long as the Americans keep their nose out of the process. Just hand over the licenses and shut up. Interesting side note. As I was preparing for this video, I looked up the images of popular anime and manga creators, and I was surprised at how many of them have never been seen by the public, because it's not uncommon for anime and manga authors to hide their faces, or write under pseudonyms. They do that to avoid public shame, should their properties fail. Sometimes they'll even take years off in the middle of a series just so they can focus on ways to improve or maintain the high level of excellence fans expect of their work. Now that's a bit extreme, but I wish our filmmakers had that same level of honor when producing their work. Here, our filmmakers just throw garbage out there. And if you don't like it, they'll call you a bigot, ignorant, or suffering from some unspecified phobia. They don't like to take blame for what they do. They just blame us for not liking it. And while I have you here, please check out my previous video. I put a lot of effort into making it, and I think it's something you might enjoy. Here's a quick preview. As the late Kevin Samuels used to say, we see God being portrayed as a cosmic Santa Claus. Now this is one of my biggest pet peeves with the modern church. Not Christianity, the church. This idea that God is supposed to provide a husband. Over and over again, I've heard pastor after pastor preach this nonsense to women. They say things like, pray for your future husband. And when they're no longer of marrying age, they say things like, marriage is a ministry, and not everybody was called to be married. So what they're doing is making it seem like marriage is something that God wills or ordains. Much like being a pastor, prophet, or elder. You have to be born with some special anointing to be a wife. And if you are chosen to be a wife, God will send you a man. And that's complete bullshit. That's biblical malpractice. Because God doesn't promise anyone a husband. First of all, if you want to be biblical, a father is supposed to choose a husband for his daughter. But if the father is deceased, it's supposed to be the elder men of the family. Yet God, in his foreknowledge, knowing that one day that tradition would be lost, still gives us guidelines in scripture on how to choose a spouse. He tells us what we should look for in a mate and what we should avoid. But no one is assigned a spouse. No one is assigned a husband. God doesn't call people into marriage, and he didn't create anyone specifically with you in mind. Marriage is a practical, natural choice for which he offers help and direction. But nevertheless, that's what pastors preach. Because it's a revenue generator. The average church attendee is a single woman in her 50s, and that's what they like to hear, because women are aspirational. They're quick to dismiss logic in the hope of a miracle. And telling a woman that God will provide her a husband removes the burden of responsibility in getting married, because now it's all on him, and all she has to do is wait. But it also gives a comfort to women who've missed their opportunities to be married, because now it isn't their fault they didn't find a husband. It's God's choice that they remain single. Because remember, marriage is a ministry, and they weren't called to be married. So you see now how that BS works? And what ultimately ends up happening is you get a bunch of Lolo Jones. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. What do you have to say about it? Leave a comment in the comment section and let's have a conversation. Okay, so you've heard me say this a million times. So if you like this video, please give it a like and leave a comment in the comments section and share the link on your social media platforms. And if you are new to my channel, please subscribe and turn on that notification bell. That way you'll get alerts every time I upload a new content. This is the Layman's Journal. Thanks for stopping by. I'm out.
Hell! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
And while I do appreciate you sharing, subbing, and leaving comments, I'm going to ask that you take another step further in keeping the channel going. I set up a membership plan for those of you who would like to offer further support in the development of this channel. It's not anything expensive or special, I'm just asking for 99 cents a month, which is enough for me to continue doing the work that I do here.
Help me! Help me! Help me!
In the future, there will be additional tiers with added benefits, but for right now, I just need your support so that I can cover basic costs. So please, sign up so I can continue bringing you awesome content. This is the Laymans Journal. I'm out.